On these last 2 days leading up to Thanksgiving, the President of the United States handed out meals to underprivileged and calmly reflected on all of his blessings. Just kidding. He basically endorsed an accused child molester and called somebody's dad an ungrateful fool. I'm John Berman in for Anderson. We are thankful you've joined us tonight after what has been a notable day and a half in the Trump presidency. It started out pretty traditionally yesterday afternoon, the president dutifully performing this bit of pre-Thanksgiving shtick at the White House, pardoning 2 turkeys named Drumstick and Wishbone. The president did thank the military and first responders and called for a renewal of the bonds of trust and affection between citizens of America. Trust and affection, which didn't last until sunrise, because at 5:25 a.m., the president of the United States lashed out at LaVar Ball for not being grateful enough that he helped get his son and 2 other UCLA basketball players out of China after they were arrested for shoplifting. The president wrote, "It wasn't the White House, it wasn't the State Department, it wasn't Father Laval's so-called people on the ground in China that got his son out of a long-term prison sentence. It was me." All caps, by the way. Too bad. LaVar is just a poor man's version of Don King, but without the hair. Just think, LaVar, you could have spent the next 5 to 10 years during Thanksgiving with your son in China, but no NBA contract to support you. But remember, LaVar, shoplifting is not a little thing. It's a really big deal, especially in China. Ungrateful fool. You can just feel the trust and affection oozing everywhere. First, a little context here. These tweets were ostensibly in reaction to an interview LaVar Ball did on CNN Monday night with Chris Cuomo.
I have to know what somebody's doing before I say thank you. I'm just not going to go around saying thank you.
All right, so let's...
Now, you come and shake my hand and meet me or meet my son or anybody and then say, you know what, maybe I can help you out. Okay, let's do it that way. But just because people say things, you know, it's supposed to be true, like, hey, I stopped them from saving 10 years. Maybe we was doing some talking with some other people before he even got there.
And let's not forget that a week ago today, LaVar Ball's son and the 2 other players all complied with the president's less than subtle request for gratitude.
To President Trump and the United States government, thank you for taking the time to intervene on our behalf.
Thank you to the United States government and President Trump for your efforts to bring us home.
I'd also like to thank President Trump and the United States government for the help that they provided as well.
So those thanks were not enough to satisfy the president's appetite, and here we are with this morning tweets. Again, calling LaVar Ball an ungrateful fool, and curiously, the poor man's Don King without the hair. Curious first because, is that a hair joke? Seriously? And second, is there in fact a rich man's Don King in this scenario? The actual Don King was once convicted of manslaughter, then pardoned. He is a friend of the president's. He supported and appeared with him throughout the campaign, something it doesn't seem LaVar Ball would do. Or maybe, just maybe, this is about more than hair. Were there messages in what the president said, how he said it, and the target? We will discuss that. Keeping them honest, some say this president is a master of distraction, that he goes on these types of tirades when the Russia investigation seems like it's closing in, or to distract from something else he said that's getting him unflattering press. Something like this, perhaps.
Mr. President, is an accused child molester better than a Democrat? Is an accused
Well, he
child
denies
molester
it.
better
Look,
than
he
a
denies it. I mean, if you look at what is really going on and you look at all the things that have happened over the last 48 hours, he totally denies it. He says it didn't happen.
The president coming out in support of Roy Moore, accused of molesting a 14-year-old girl. No name calling, no Twitter tirade, no criticism, just support. That was yesterday afternoon, right after the president pardoned those turkeys. Drumstick and Wishbone are now living comfortably on a Virginia farm. We hope they displayed their gratitude in a way that was satisfying to the president, else he might make fun of their hair. Lots to talk about tonight. Joining us now, 2 CNN political commentators, former South Carolina State House member Bakari and Paris Dennard, former White House director of Black Outreach for President George W. Bush. Thank you both for being here. I give thanks for your presence constantly. Bakari, I want to start with you. Do you believe that there is any racial overtone to the president's tweets, or is this just 2 self-promoters going at it on Twitter?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. But first, I think it's necessary for all of us to take a step back and judge this based on what it should be judged based upon. I mean, a year ago, you had the President of the United States, you had the 44th President of the United States. What he did on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, meaning Barack Obama, he was actually going to homeless shelters, feeding homeless veterans in Washington, D.C. That's how he spent his Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And now we have the President of the United States chastising yet another foil, which happens to be African American. And so to answer your question directly, it's yes. The president, he draws this sense of inevitability. He patronizes, he delves into these issues of racism all the time. And the reason he does it is because of the fact that he gets something out of this. He builds his currency from racism and cultural divisiveness. And so yes, his foils are the media, his foils are the establishment, but his foils are also black people, which is why we see him go after the Jamil Hills, the Steph Currys, the LaVar Balls, the Marshawn Lynches, the NFL players. The list goes on and on and on. But I think you and everyone else should take a step back and look at what a president should be and look at what Donald Trump is. We had a president who was feeding the homeless, taking care of veterans a year ago, and now we have Donald Trump.
Paris, you heard Bakari make his case right there. Do you agree with any of that?
Not one word. And I think Bakari is a very nice person. I'm thankful he's on the program tonight to offer his opinion.
Thank you. Thank you, Paris.
But you're very welcome. But the thing about this is, he is the president, whether Bakari likes it or not. He's the president of the United States. He was elected by the people. And what he did was in response to what Mr. Barr said about the president. Now, the other thing that is important to note is no one was claiming that the president was racist when he actually intervened to help get these 3 African-American basketball players from UCLA out of this Chinese jail. So either he's a racist for doing that or he's not. I don't think that he is a racist. As a matter of fact, I know he's not a racist. And so what we see here is an ungrateful father who is trying to get his 15 minutes of fame on the backs of the president, where he should be grateful that his children aren't having 15 years or more in a Chinese prison. So at the end of the day, the president intervened, like he's done on several other occasions, to get these individuals who were out of this Chinese jail back home. And so on Thanksgiving Eve and on Thanksgiving, the Barr family and the rest of the other 2 young men are with their families at Thanksgiving, and they'll be with their families on Christmas. That's something they should be grateful for, which they acknowledge, and that's something that the father should also just be grateful and say thank you. You don't have to shake his hand or meet him. You don't even have to like him, just to be gracious enough to say thank you. And what President Trump did is respond to that father's comments about President Trump, saying that he was essentially ungrateful and didn't think the president did anything to help him, which was untrue.
What are the timeline here? Before anyone said anything, President Trump said, "I wonder if the basketball players will thank me." He was the first one who threw out the notion of whether they would thank him. The players all did thank him first. It was LaVar Ball who did not. Bakari, to Paris's point, you know, the president doesn't just lash out at African Americans. There are plenty of people who the president has gone after that are white. So how do you differentiate the two?
I mean, it's pretty clear. I mean, the president establishes these groups of people that he lashes out at. I mean, you have people that are in the establishment, quote unquote, so the Jeff Flakes, the John McCains, everyone else. You have the media. And then you have these other subsects. I mean, he lashes out at African Americans. For example, the clearest example of this is you had Eminem, for example, at the BET Awards. John, I don't know if you were watching the BET Awards like the rest of us. However, Eminem went on this amazing rap that he went on down the litany of reasons he disrespected and didn't like the president of the United States. What has happened? The president did not respond. The president has this tendency of not responding to people who simply look like him. I mean, this is not a difficult or something that is a controversy whatsoever. The fact is, the president of the United States picks these foils, and many of these foils either fall in a few categories. They're Muslim, they're immigrant, they are establishment figures, which are elected officials, or they're African American, and that's where LaVar Ball falls in the category. This is not a controversial tactic, and the reason he does this is because he's waging these controversial, divisive cultural wars, which he feels as if he can win.
Paris, there was another aspect to what the president said. There was the "it was me" in all caps of that tweet, referring, of course, to himself. You know, is that the most gracious way you think that a president can act?
Well, I'll tell you what, if I was trying to soften relations or improve relations with North Korea to keep them from having a nuclear weapon, and using my relationship with China to try to do that. And I went over there and advocated to get these 3 young men out of a Chinese jail. And I came back and the father was being ungrateful. I would remind him who did it too. At the end of the day, the person who intervened was the president, and the president is Donald J. Trump. It was him. It wasn't anybody else. It was him. He negotiated that release, and he negotiated the release of 2 other persons that we all know about, Otto and the Egyptian American woman. And so this is what he does, and he deserves the credit. We don't want to give him credit when he deserves the credit. And in this instance, again, Thanksgiving Eve, tomorrow, those 3 young men will be with their families instead of sitting in a Chinese jail. The simple thing to do is to say thank you.
In the 3 men?
That's the biggest problem, though, John, is that the president is so small. He's such a small individual that he wants to come down and he needs the adoration. He needs the adoration. He needs people to actually say, oh my God, you're president of the United States. You're the 45th president of the United States. I mean, that is such a small man. Like, know what the president should be doing. And that's why I want to hear Paris's response and anyone else's response who thinks this is a good idea to actually show the contrast. What did Barack Obama do? What did George W. Bush do?
Let me ask Paris
what did Bill
to
Clinton do?
They
all did something vastly different than than what Paris wants to say this president did the day before Thanksgiving.
Paris, respond to that specifically. You know, should the president be out on this Thanksgiving the day before, you know, at a soup kitchen with veterans, the like?
Well, I don't know what the president is doing tomorrow, so we can see what he does tomorrow. We can see what he does the rest of the week leading up into the holidays. But I do know what the vice president of the United States was doing. He was actually with our wounded warriors and visiting our troops. And I don't know what President Obama did during his first term as president. I don't recall what President George W. Bush during his first term as president before Thanksgiving, the day before. But I do know what this president is doing, which is trying to get tax cuts for middle class Americans and small business owners, so that when they're talking around the Thanksgiving table, I wish the conversation would be about the tax cut that's coming to them that this Congress is going to vote on, and hopefully we can get that done by Christmas. So that's what this president is doing.
Paris
He's doing
Dennard,
things for the
Paris
American
Dennard,
people.
Bakari Sellers, thank you. Please, both of you, enjoy your Thanksgiving.
Sure will.
Thank you.
All right, so what